Welcome to the March Test of the Month Club. Happy to talk a little bit about donor autonomy, and seen a couple of blog posts around this recently. The inspiration for this for me was actually Adam Grant's new book called Think Again. And one of the theses that runs throughout the book is the idea that people generally don't like to be convinced. They are most convincible when they don't think they are being convinced, when they are making up in their own mind. And if you cross over some of those lines by being aggressive, giving answers, telling people what they should be doing, that they're less likely to budge. And that getting people to change is a process, and that it involves being an active, empathetic listener that's really engaged in truth seeking. So this actually has some application in our fundraising world. So a couple of examples that are of interesting. The phrase, "you will probably refuse, but." And so there were 640 people walking on the south coast of Brittany, France. And I know you're going to think correctly that this is a face-to-face street fundraising test. But here is the coast of Brittany, France. And I got to say, I absolutely would refuse to talk to that person. I'd rather be on this beach. It looks quite lovely. But they found people who were willing to talk to them for a minute about the 1001 Smiles organization. So this is the exact script. They said, first, can you give me 1 minute for 1001 Smiles organization? They did actually say that in French, of course. And then the rest of the script said, they introduced the organization and then said, you're probably interested in helping organizations for children with health problems. I wonder if you could help us by making a donation. And the only change that they made in the test version is they said, I know you will probably refuse, but I wonder if you could help us by making a donation. And so here are the results. The control condition, 25% of people complied with the request. In the experimental condition, 39% of people complied with the request for the donation. The average gift did go down ever so slightly, as you can see, 2.44 euros to 2.25 euros. So less than a 10% decrease, which is more than paid for by the increased number of people coming in. And those on the call know that generally speaking, when you have an increase in the number of people donating, average gift tends to go down because you're getting more marginal prospects in there. The fact that it went down ever so slightly is a really good indicator in this. So all in all, you would definitely want to add the you will probably refuse but language. So then there's the question of why. And the authors put in 3 different potential reasons that someone might do this. The first is reactance, and this is kind of the going theory and the reason that they did the study thinking that reactance could have it. So reactance is this idea of, if I am being told to do something, I don't do it out of a desire for my own autonomy. I kind of call this the nuh-uh. For those of you who have kids, you'll recognize that one. It's the nuh-uh reaction, the automatic gainsaying of whatever you are being told to do. And the idea here is, hey, perhaps we have used kind of the double negative. We've said you're going to do this negative thing, and then the person reacts to that by saying, I'll show you, I'll donate is what I'm going to do. So that could be part of it. The second potential option is that there's impression management going on. If you think that someone thinks you look like the type of person who would not give to a child's charity, you may say, oh, there's something wrong going on with the impression that I'm putting out into the world. I may not have wanted to do it at this time, but I certainly feel like I'm the type of person who would give to a children's charity. So I wonder what I'm giving off. I need to show this person that I am that good type of person. So that's the impression management side. And then there's a third one that's kind of interesting. Researchers have found that Giving in placebic information can sometimes help with persuasion. And so it's giving a person kind of the pause between the information containing parts of a sentence with some nonsense. And the best analogy I can think of is Bob Hope, when he used to do stand-up, would insert the phrase, "but I want to tell you," after his punchlines, so that if people laughed, they wouldn't miss anything. And if they didn't laugh, he could just segue right into the next joke. And it was kind of that nonsense phrase that was like the rest in the music. That's what they're saying with placebic information. And the authors tend to indicate that it's probably some combination of these. It's not any one factor, but it's a lot of these factors. But this desire for autonomy is likely a part of it, and this reactance theory. So what if we just straight up told people, you are free, you have autonomy? And so, but you are free is an actual technique. Similar setup to the street fundraising, except they are asking people, would you have some coins to take the bus, please, in the control condition? And then, would you have some coins to take the bus, please, but you are free to accept or to refuse? So straight up saying, you can say no. And similar results to what we saw before, but a more dramatic effect. 10% of people gave coins when they weren't given autonomy, and almost half gave coins when they were told that they had this type of autonomy, that they could give the coins or could not give the coins. This is not the only test of this type. There was a study that looked at household wastes. So do you sort your household wastes? So trying to get compliance for separating out recycling. So the control is, hey, would you recycle? Then there's oh goodness, foot in the door, not food in the door, as popular as that is during our pandemic. This is not about getting food delivered to you. This is about getting your foot in the door like an old school brush salesperson, at which point I would think you would mace them. Foot in the door is not an acceptable technique in the literal sense. But in the figurative sense, people use it to say, let's ask you to do this small thing and then a large thing afterwards. And we've talked a little bit about that in previous tests of the month. So they said, would you do a short survey about your sorting habits? And then, hey, would you sort your household wastes? Then they tried the but you are free language. Of course, you are free to accept or refuse. A more common formulation of this is, but you are free to say no. And there are a lot of studies that use that type of language. And then they looked at a fourth condition. Let's see what happens if we put the foot in the door or the food in the door. Hey, why not? And then tell people, would you sort, you're free to accept or refuse? And sure enough, stacking these techniques worked better than either technique alone, which worked better than not using any technique. And in fact, you'll probably remember back when we were talking about emergency donors, people said that one of the things that they were seeking, especially in this COVID pandemic time, number one was hope. Number two is kind of a sense of control and autonomy. And so this idea of donor autonomy, if that's what a person is seeking with their gift, I want to have more control over this crazy out of control world, and I can do that by supporting the charities that I love. No one's going to stop me from doing that. You can appeal to that same type of autonomy by telling them you're free to say no. We're not pushing you too hard so that you have this reactance to us. So then a meta study looked at 42 different studies of but you are free type tests. And as you might guess, it worked, but it worked best when you're talking to a person. This type of face-to-face or a synchronous platform works well in telemarketing. It does work in mail and email, but it doesn't work as well, in part because there's not a person telling you that story right in front of you. I wish I had a live study of this, but I gave this presentation to a client. Essentially, they loved it, and they said, yes, let's roll out with that. And so from then on, their PSs also often had the phrase, but you're free to say no. They liked it so much, they rolled out with it, so there's no test. We had some year-over-year statistics, but it's confounded by a bunch of other changes, so we'll never know from them. I put this out into the universe and say, if you run a test on this, we would love to hear about it, because there's the scientific literature, and they do as strong an example as they can of what a real life environment is going to be. But even these fairly realistic fundraising face-to-face simulations aren't quite the same as I am going to send a real letter for real money. So giving people autonomy by telling them they are free to say no, or telling them that you'll probably say no, kind of that classic negging approach to fundraising. Any questions on any of this? While we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll do my usual vamping. So the things that we vamp about first: would love to have your live tests in this test of the month. So if you have a test, or you've done a test you think would be interesting to the greater group, we would love to have those in here, because, as I said, those are the real life examples of what's going on. Second, if you have ideas of what you would like covered in these meetings, types of tests, questions you want answered, I'm happy to dig into the research and see what I can find. No guarantees that there is something, but usually there can be something. And then the third thing is that we're now over at More, a little bit of a cheap plug. We're now kind of committing ourselves to an every other week webinar series. So if that's something that's interesting to you, our next one is about male issues. Our one in early April is about a professor about the science of influence. So if those types of topics are of interest to you, feel free to sign up at moredmgroup.com. But of course, you are free to say no. And I am not seeing any questions. If you do have questions after this, please email me at n.ellinger. I know it says Shannon McCracken. I am actually Nick Ellinger. N.Ellinger, that's N-E-L-L-I-N-G-E-R, at more, M-O-O-R-E, D-M, group.com. Thank you for your time today, and I hope this was helpful.